All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Gambino, and I work in Transfer in the marketing department. And today I am extremely excited to introduce the topic AI in freight, cutting through the noise. On this topic, we have a robust roundtable of experts that are going to detail some of what we see in the freight industry, the AI application, and how to think through it strategically. As we get started, I do want to run through a few housekeeping items. So as we begin, questions are, of course, welcome and encouraged. Submit them as you think of them. Our presenters will answer them at the end. And then you can go ahead and use the Q&A button or the chat, and we will field those towards the end of the call. And then a recording of today's session will be made available directly after the webinar. It'll be emailed out to the email that you registered with. And then as just a quick note, any offers, rates, or marketing strategies that you see on today's call is not a reflection of a specific offer presented through the company. So just keep that in mind. And then I'd like to pass this off to our expert, Don Everhart, to introduce you to your speakers. Don, take it away.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Frank, and thanks everyone for joining us today. For anyone that knows me, you know that this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I get to talk about this with a great group of professionals today. So, for those that don't know me, I'm Don Everhart. I head partnerships and strategy here at Transflow, and we'll go around the group here and just do some quick intros. I'm joined by Justin. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Justin King. I'm Transflow's Chief Product Officer.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Jay Tomasello.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Jay Tomasello here. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here. I've also got over 15 years in the freight and transportation industry, so excited to talk about AI with you today.
Mr. Brian Soul.
Greetings, everyone. Brian Soul, Head of Product Platform, which specifically is, think of it as tying everything together and keeping those connections going. So I'm very excited to have this conversation.
And then rounding us out, Emily Stratton.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Stratton. I'm our VP of Customer Solutions here. I come to you from a business perspective. I was part of an top brokerage and oversaw their back office. So I come from the business experience, but also help working through business solutions and best practices.
Excellent. Thanks. So that rounds out our group today. And much like other panels, we want to keep this authentic. We want to keep it real, and we're just going to have a conversation today. So we're going to jump into some of the questions that we have. We'll frame those, and then while we have some designated speakers around some of those, I'll throw these to. I ask everyone to just kind of join in, and especially in the audience. If you have questions, I do know we'll address them at the end, but please feel free to throw those in the chat because we want to make sure that we answer everything that you have in mind today. So our first question, how do you separate what's actually going on to move the needle in your business from what's just noise, right? So as we think about this one, every week there's a new headline, and it covers a wide spectrum. It's either AI is going to transform freight overnight in total, or you have the other end, which is, it's overinvested infrastructure that's not really going to do anything, and you'll see it unwind, right? So when we look at the headlines that are occurring, you see things from like Klarna and Microsoft where, they've had these discussions about the failures and where they are refocusing. So as we think about our operators in the audience today, this I'm going to go to Jay on to start. How do you separate what's actually going on from, what we're seeing in the, I know you and I talk a lot about the hype cycle or the news cycle. How should people be thinking about how to separate this?
Yeah, it's a great question, Don. And it's kind of hard these days. You don't know what to believe, reading the media. We are very much in a hype cycle right now. And with that comes a lot of unfounded claims, over enthusiasm. But as with anything else, especially with the media, the truth is always somewhere in between, right? In between the two extremes. So there is no doubt that we are in a computing revolution right now. I have likened this to the scale of going from mainframe computing to basically client server or PCs in terms of a model. It's in my mind, it's bigger than the internet. However, just as today, we all still use an ERP, we all still use an accounting package, we all still use HR, we all still use a TMS, just like we did 30 years ago. There's certain things that remain fundamental throughout, regardless of how, when, and where you're using AI. So will AI bring us, and does it bring us value? Absolutely, no doubt about it. Is it the end all be all, and is it going to be the savior of all mankind? Probably not, and definitely probably not the transportation industry. There's still a lot of human problems that need to be solved. Unequivocally, what it does do is it accelerates the solutions. And so what I always tell people is, in terms of moving the needle, is it going to do this for me? Well, that's really up to you. It's how you define the application. It's how you define where you're going to use it. And ultimately, just like any other business problem, how are you going to measure it? And so making sure that you have a tight constrained scope around whatever AI use case you have, how you're going to measure the value out of it on the back end, that is largely what's going to determine your success here. I will add one other thing, because you mentioned, keeping up with the hype cycle, Don, which is very smart and astute observation. You just simply can't chase this thing these days. I mean, it's like chasing a rabbit. It's constantly changing, it's constantly in flux, and it's going to continue to change. So you just have to pick something and go with it. Pick a model, pick an agent, and stay with it. Again, the fundamentals are largely going to be there and not change much. But just keep in mind, we are in a state of rapid transformation. We're very early innings right now.
Right. Yeah, and I've likened it to the tools of an artist, right? There's also a capabilities matrix, right? And
Yep.
Brian, I know you have some thoughts on this. Is there anything that you would add on to this one as we talk through this?
Yeah, essentially, Jade hit the main point the best, which is we're so early, but we're also pretty far, which means that the largest AI models, the largest companies, they're doing phenomenal things at breakneck speed, but the rest of everyone is trailing behind. And as they trail behind, things will iterate and change at a high frequency. And so this changing creates a new type of mindset that everybody has to have, which is, how can I adapt once I choose the model, solution, agent, or whatever that's right for me? Because that change is going to be frequent. And I know many of us experience this. For example, a lot of us were very happy with our iPhone 10 and did everything we needed it to. And
For sure.
And now our iPhones almost don't look recognizable. So, but the adaptation is what keeps us ahead of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great point. And maybe we go on to our second question here, because I think there's also a foundational piece that we have to speak to. So second question is, we start talking about agentic AI, and what's that difference from the AI that's already embedded? So you hear, I'll move this up a level. You hear the phrase AI everywhere, right? And so then you really start hearing agentic AI everywhere. And Jay, maybe this is one that you can give some clarification on. In plain language, what is agentic AI? How does it differentiate from AI embedded solutions? That we see in the SaaS space specifically.
Yeah. So I'll actually take one step back and talk about what is AI, because a lot of times my business partners, especially stepping back 6 months ago, this was all still very new. And I would hear things like, oh, we should automate that business logic with AI. Well, that's just kind of deterministic. And that's what we've been able to do with computers since really the 1940s. So where AI really differs is coming up with forward-looking insights that may not necessarily be evident just by looking at the code or the output of the code. So taking it up a level from there, what are some AI solutions? Well, you have machine learning, you have cognitive AI, you have neural networks, you have agentic AI, and then the next level up is really how is that delivered? One delivery mechanism is via software as a service or SaaS. Another delivery mechanism is agentic itself, which usually means we're deploying an agent onto the desktop, but that can happen through SaaS as well. So there's lots of different delivery mechanisms for AI. This question specifically is really about, well, what does that mean in the context of what I read about? And how does SaaS and agentic differ? Well, an agent really is something that is kind of forward deployed, usually visible to you in some way. It's going to take multiple steps on its own based on its own internal reasoning. And that internal reasoning is going to be bounded by, guidelines that you set or guardrails that you set. So a large part of it is, you're feeding the AI context about the landscape that it's going to live and operate in. So a lot of times that's your business rules. That's also your data. You're training it on data to recognize patterns, what's normal, what's outside the normal on either end of a bell curve. So those are the things that really is what makes AI. And the agentic piece is really about giving that AI a head, a face, and watching it take multiple steps and reasoning in front of you. That second part of your question, about embedded AI, at TransFlow, we really deliver AI in multiple different ways. Headless in the sense that, we have a core AI processing engine that takes in all sorts of information and documents and extracts insights from that and then feeds it into a SaaS application, which then has its own embedded agents in it. And so those agents, you can actually see taking multiple steps in the background to resolve any inconsistencies or things that don't match, or to reach out on behalf of you as the customer to your customer. So that's really what makes agentic. A lot of times when you see it in the press and in the media, agentic AI is about, forward deploying something into your environment and not necessarily a hosted application, but deploying it and customizing it to really what your business logic and business needs and rules are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think an important distinction there is these two things get conflated quite a bit, right? Like it turns into a type of AI soup. And for any of our other panelists, feel free to add on if there's anything you'd add here. Justin, I don't know if you like if you can share some experiences that you've had on like those two things getting mixed in conversations as you're talking to stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to be super clear about what you mean by AI. Generative AI, there's agentic AI, and to be clear about what the solution is that you're pursuing is super important. And also, back to this question you had on, separating out the noise from what's real. Instead of just focusing on solutions, focusing on a problem that you can solve. So much of the noise around AI is, everything's AI and that AI is going to be wonderful, but it certainly is. But you have to target it to specific problems, business problems that you're facing, and solve those problems with the AI. And certainly, agentic AI is one area where, it's critical to have that alignment.
Yeah, being solutions focused and outcomes focused is a critical piece. And I think that's actually a pretty tight tie into our next question here. And that
before
one's
we move on,
oh,
Don,
sorry, go ahead, Jay. Yeah,
yeah, just something to add on to that's really important to understand. You also have to recognize the difference between the agent itself and then the different tools that it calls on. So what a lot
precisely.
of folks don't realize when you're interacting via chat GPT or Claude chat, whatever, a lot of times when you're prompting it with certain questions, it's not actually using an LLM in the background. It actually has machine learning plugins. It actually has deterministic tooling built into it. And so you have to understand that the same goes for an agent. Your agent may still need to, for example, reach out to an API that does document extraction and interpretation at scale. Just because it's an agent doesn't mean that it will have that capability built into it. So a lot of times agents are there to orchestrate a lot of different back-end capabilities. And that's the context in which a lot of companies use agentic AI is they have a business process that spans multiple divisions, multiple business domains, and they have different applications there. And rather than go through the long and arduous process of integrating them, the previous solution used to be robotic process automation, RPA, where, kind of simulate a user clicking in three different applications and three different screens. Well, the agentic agent can do that now. And it can actually reason with what it's bringing back, but it can also call out to other back-end services, like, for example, TransFlow's Core AI, where we're doing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of document extractions a day and consolidating all of that LLM volume and AI volume with our own engine and passing those costs along to you. So something that it often gets presented as a mutually or an or. It's like,
Right.
use agentic solutions or do I use an AI SaaS solution? And a lot of times the answer is both.
Right.
So just keep in mind that the agentic piece, really means, hey, this thing is orchestrating against multiple backend capabilities or multiple applications at the same time. And it may still need to rely on other SaaS services, other API-based services, or other AI capabilities.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great clarification. I appreciate you diving in on that one a little bit. So even as we talk about kind of those tool calls and the layering, right? I think this, and Brian, I know you've got a lot of opinions on this, so we're going to come to you with this one. So, what's the difference between really a wrapper AI and purpose-built AI? So everyone has heard people reference the wrapper solutions, those tools built on top of the general purpose or frontier models. Brian, what do you think that, people should really be thinking about as they evaluate the difference between those items and what it means for the output and outcomes that they get from those types of solutions?
Yeah, Don, that's a wonderful question. And you're right. I do feel very strongly about it, probably a little bit too strongly. But I did want to talk about it from a illustration first. The term wrapper solution is really an amazing word picture. You think of your favorite candy bar. I'm going to think about, don't judge me. I'm going to think about Snickers because it's nice and simple. I'm so interested in that Snickers that if the wrapper changed on outside of that Snickers, I'm still going to buy it and I'm still going to eat it because I don't really care about the wrapper. I only care about that taste, the flavor, and the happiness that a Snickers brings me.
Mhm.
So a wrapper solution, really think about it as a thin layer of software put on top of your favorite frontier model, as you call them, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. What's really happening at that point is these wrapper solutions or these companies that are trying to go quick out into the market, they're building such a thin layer, but everything that model does is the same it would do for you through a chat window. For an example, when I say thin layer, what am I saying? technically, any one of us can install a free model on our computer like Llama, and then we could download a layer called Chainlit. And the two together can all of a sudden, with maybe a RAG pipeline, have this awesome chat, powerful chat that can read our emails and look through our documents. While that is impressive and it's useful, and the RAG pipeline does help be specific in the documents that it references, it really is still just a layer on top of a model. However, on the other side, a purpose-built model focuses on the actual problem and is trained and fine-tuned on the problem specific to it. So I did want to mention one thing. Where we are in history is pretty insane. The models, frontier models, are currently at like 80 to 90% self-training. So just to put that into perspective, what that means is as they get responses from their users, they choose whether or not they're going to listen to that response. So for an example, you're like, oh, Gemini, what's the best workout for shoulders? And Gemini responds and says something along the lines of, well, I think, or from my perspective, it's the overhead press. And you say, no, I don't like overhead press. The AI model doesn't actually know whether you're right or not. And over the course of time, it won't refer to a real human in an entire training module to get that answer fully dialed in. So the question is, what are we going to do and what does that mean? Imagine for a moment you did build that thin layer and that free model, and you are training it, you have that pipeline, but all you can really do is change the prompts because the model is not trainable unless you own it. So think about how you reprompt. When you talk to a child, you may say something like, okay, Bob or Billy, what did you think about the baseball game? If it was Billy's very first baseball game and he had no idea what innings were, he had no idea why this guy is swinging a bat at a ball, the answer he gives you is probably pretty poor. And then you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to reframe the question. And then you reframe the question and Billy can answer it a little bit better. However, the real problem is that Billy hasn't been trained in baseball. So now you're just reframing a question, getting a little bit better of an answer, but it's still not exactly what you're looking for. So what's the difference with purpose-built models then? Instead of covering off on 80% of the routine interactions and then still having to deal with 20% of it, you can now take those 20% of items, edge cases, ambiguous contract language, detention disputes. You could take all of those things and now train a model specifically. The question is, can you build it? Absolutely. However, there's one more problem. Imagine you have a really, really great customer and you've had it for 10 years. That customer, year over year, slightly changes their rules, but tribally, so everybody in the company that you work for knows exactly what that shipper needs. Every single time, everyone's like, oh yeah, never forget this, always add this, and that knowledge circulates throughout the company. But what happens, God forbid, if you lose that shipper? All of that data that you have on it tribally becomes stale. Mm-hmm. And then when you acquire a new customer, you have to rebuild all of that data from the very beginning. So that's why when you think about whether to build or buy, those questions will be answered in a little bit. But what I wanted to mention is imagine having the base data on all of those customers. And as you acquire new customers, lose some customers, you never have to rebuild that process over and over again. So long story short, are wrapper solutions useful? Absolutely. Can you build them yourself? Most likely. Are they sustainable? That's for you to decide.
Yeah. And so one, when you went with the candy bar analogy and you kept saying layer, I was waiting on layer of nougat, and we never got there. So
Snicker has nougat.
Yeah, you lost me for a little while. I was very focused on the Snickers. However, you unpacked some important points there. Yes, there is the local knowledge when you're doing a build on your own, right? But when you're working with someone that specializes in some of these areas, um, even if a customer may move on, that knowledge is never lost. You get the network effect of many in that solution. So I think it was a great tie in there.
Put a point on that, Don. A lot of times it's hard to sniff out, am I buying, a real capability, or am I buying something that's just a wrapper? And a lot of time, I'll say this, real AI is hard.
Mhm.
Sort of the allure part of AI is that, I can do things really, really fast. And as a consumer of AI, that's true. But for those of us that are building AI, to do it right and to do it in a real value added way, it is still a hard endeavor. And the tooling makes it more and more easier every day, but it's still, man, you're dealing with a lot of data, and you're dealing with, the ends of the bell curve, so to speak. So that leads me to, just provide the guidance that a lot of times you can buy something that, unbeknownst to you, is just taking your request and shipping it off to another back end LLM.
Mhm.
That may work 80% of the time, sometimes even 90% of the time. But the last 20% Pareto that really matters to you as a customer, you're not going to be very satisfied with those results. And secondly, a wrapper solution, the economics around a wrapper solution are always such that they are pinned to the pricing of the LLM provider.
Right.
So right now, we're in the crack stage of AI. All of the dealers are out on the streets giving out free samples of the AI crack, and we're all getting hooked on it. Once we all get tied into it, the data center economics, the compute economics really are they're already starting to catch up with us as an economy, but they're really going to start impacting us from a price perspective. And so what is super cheap today is not going to be super cheap tomorrow. And there's multiple monetization angles that these big frontier model providers haven't even opened up yet.
Yeah.
And so the net effect of that is going to be, if you have bought a wrapper solution that doesn't have their own native core AI capability, when the prices start rising, yours are going to rise equally. So there's no cost benefit there, because there's always a middleman taking a markup, and they're always pinned to the price of the anchor provider, the frontier model provider.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've oh, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was just Jay brought out a actually fantastic point that I also feel strongly about. The cost plus model is the only way they can survive. So one of the things that we as consumers across the board should be asking is, what kind of pricing model are they using? Because this will allow us to make better decisions.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jay hit the nail on the head.
And I want to keep this conversational and not like just go question to question. So we can actually advance to the next question, because this is a perfect tie-in. I think we can just keep going with the same narrative. And I would ask Jay and Brian to stick with me here. Justin, feel free to jump in on this as well. But we get the question, build me an AI, right? And what I think we're starting to talk about here is, what's that even mean, right? So if I'm a mid-sized carrier broker, and CEO or COO walks in, it's like, build me an AI. What, like, and you have an enthusiastic IT team who wants to use the tooling. And Jay, I think you and I have even had several of these conversations. I think it's about knowing, one, what that means, and then two, understanding, the limitations and the holes. I mean, how many times have I hopped on a call with you and I was like, hey, I've got a basis of a thing here, but like 20% of it's AI slop, so please ignore that. Like, this isn't my firm opinion, right? but we got to a fast thing where we could have a conversation. And you were just unpacking, those costs, right? And I think as we think through that, how do costs and risks actually stack up from what, we initially think, or even when we're evaluating something versus what the reality ends up being, from an initial estimate to like true impact and like long running costs?
Yeah. Let me start off with sort of an anecdote, and I hear this a lot.
Sure.
And this really speaks to where we're at on the hype cycle. And I'm guessing that everyone out there in the virtual audience is going to identify with this. And maybe we could just do a little interactive thing. How many, raise your hands, have heard some version of the story? I know somebody who built, challenged their team, and, somebody built this on the weekend, and I was able to cancel, my TMS subscription or whatever else and save $500,000. And they did it on the weekend. Let's see, something on that order of magnitude. Who's heard that? Show of hands. Or can we do hands?
Yeah,
I don't know.
you just hit raise hand at the bottom of the Zoom. I see 3 of the 78 attendees. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's ticking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while that's going, what I'll say is this. Yes, in the build versus buy question, you can throw up 30% of the capabilities of another SaaS provider. And yeah, the LLM can make 30% of those capabilities work. Here's the question. Is it performant? In other words, not just to the individual user. When I enter the request, is it going to come back in 30 seconds versus somebody who has their own core AI solution comes back in, a fraction of a second? The other aspect of performance is the scale. Is it going to scale from 1 to 5 business users to 200 business users? Then you have the whole reliability aspect of it, which is self-evident. The other piece of this that often gets missed is you're going to pay one way or the other. It goes back to the old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And this is another good interactive question. I have seen lots of colleagues whose they started off at the beginning of the year with a budget for AI of, say, 5,000 a month, and it has ballooned to 50,000 a month, right? This is what happens. And look, I'm giving both sides of it so you can be aware of the economics. When you do the all-in costs, and when your developers are using a coding agent all day long, that meter is ticking. The tokens are bouncing off the floor, and the meter is ticking, and they're using the newer model. And yes, it's better and it's a little faster, but now the tokens are ticking even faster. And so one way or the other, you're paying the price. And you may not be getting the full capability of what you could get if you buy off the shelf. So we're an advocate of picking your partner and being aware of the economics. So the other aspect of this is, TransFlow, for example. I can speak to what I know, but we're aggregating all the AI traffic, and where we are using LLMs off the shelf or with a RAG pipeline, we are able to give that to you, pass those savings along to you. Whereas if you are buying capacity via API hits, via tokens from Anthropic, you're going to pay a lot more than we are. For example, AWS comes to me once a quarter and says, hey, what is your demand going to look like for the coming quarter? Because we want to make sure we have reserved enough AI compute for you in the regions that you use. That's because we're aggregating so much demand on our side. And we're also running some of these models locally within our cloud. So that gets to the kind of core business proposition, core AI business proposition. But look, you're going to pay one way or the other. It may look cheap for the guy that can build it on the weekend up front, but in the long run, the meter starts ticking and it ticks faster and faster.
Yeah. Well, and I get why, and this takes us to the next question too. And Emily, I think you'll be able to, or well suited to answer this from a business side, right? But I get why there's so much appetite, because AI is an accelerator, right? And it is easy to like stand some things up, like we've talked through that. But we talk to companies all the time, and they're overwhelmed, right? They're going to their IT teams. They're going, "Hey, I'm new to AI. You guys surely know this. Help." But as they're doing that, they're not solving necessarily the same problems. So, Emily, I think the question for you is, how do you help companies, get aligned internally before they even commit to an AI strategy? And what are some of the things that are driving them in that direction?
Yeah, and I did too want to comment on the buy versus build.
Yeah.
I've worked at a company that was we're a technology company and we wanted to build everything. And now being on this side of the fence, and it didn't work out well, right? Our TMS was the sole focus, as it should be for, on a brokerage side, and any revenue generating products are going to be high priority. They might build something that helps solve for a pain point initially, but it wasn't a focus to continue to build onto it, continue to improve. Now being on this side of things, as I can see why, and we end up, we end up buying instead of building, or it was a lot of throwaway work and a lot of resources that we used up.
Mhm.
Now, being on this side of the fence, on the technology side, it's wildly important to work with a vendor that, I get to see, me personally, all of the different scenarios and pain points across all of our customers, the common ones there. And we are building for those and solving for those because we see this as an industry pain point and that we need to work through them. So we're constantly improving our products, seeing what the need is in the industry, and constantly making those updates. We have the teams that are specializing in these different areas to continue to improve and stay up with the industry. So it's so important, whatever vendor you move forward with, that's the stuff that I would ask is, do you have people that know the business, the pain points, that are focusing on the industry pain points, or do you have just a tech team that is just looking at what's the shiny ball at that point? And we're very lucky here, as you can see with this team, and we have our larger team that we specialize in both. So it's really exciting, all the stuff we do here with, under Jay's leadership. So,
Yeah.
and so to my question of, we hear this a lot. A lot of I would say the number one pain points that we see with teams that are ready to automate, they're ready to take that next step into automating the process using AI. But they get to that ready point and they don't have that IT backing to say, okay, we're ready as well, to put in the work to make sure that whatever solution that you need AI to help solve for, that we are there to support you in the most efficient way possible, so that is successful. There's competing priorities, like the team mentioned here. There's competing priorities. There's, hey, we've built this already. I know it's not working really well, but we put so much time and effort in it. It's like, okay, so you're going to drag out that process that you built and it's been not successful. The team's saying that's the biggest pain point, but you want to keep kind of, let it die out. Let's move forward. You're going to only cost more money trying to keep it alive than to, what's the term? Drain your sorrows and move forward.
Right.
I don't know. So, I think that's the biggest thing. And I would say not just IT, right? there's other departments too that you want to get on board with. You want change management leaders on your side. Anytime that I was moving forward, when we eventually got buy-in that we need to buy, not to build, I got my teams together and all the different department leaders together and say, here's what I'm doing. Here's the benefits of it. Here's what it's going to solve for. When they hear what's going to help solve their team's problems and downstream, their customer experience, their sales teams, their ops teams, not having to handle a lot of this stuff. When they see that, they see the value of it, everyone jumps on board. And if you don't have that, then that's when you get that change management leader to help work through that. You show the metrics. I don't know how many times I'm on calls with both the tech team leadership, the ops leaderships, the sales leaderships, and I'm helping to advocate for the business needs so they can see the value there. And we've gone through it. It's not a I get the question a lot of like, hey, like, do you see this with other customers? Like, why, just as an us issue? No, we do see it with other customers, and we help through that, and we know exactly what's needed to help get that past the finish line.
Yeah. So, and Emily, similar to you, and you know this, but the audience may not. Like, many of us come from the other side, right?
Right.
So I mean, Jay was at a carrier, like Justin's been in the business, Brian's been in the, I was at a brokerage and a carrier, and so I too have always been a builder. I'm like, hey, I can build anything. I'll tell you, I am a toolbox guy now. I'm like, hey, like, if it's moded and it's something like important, like absolutely, like let's invest. But if it's a small piece of what I do and there's, a buy option, I'm typically trying to go that way. And I think that takes us to like some of that business decisioning. So let's say your business has decided like, hey, like we want to build, or we're like in this build buy dilemma. You really have to then move on to the risk and trust aspects of it, right? And so as we look at that, there's a lot. And this is an area where I have a lot of passion. I know, Jay, you have a lot of passion around this, but as we think about the things that we would tell our audience to look at, right? The data isolation, model portability, getting over embedded with a singular vendor, like what is the lift and shift if you're working with someone that has like a relationship with a like key frontier provider, and that doesn't align with your business, or it doesn't align with your strategy, how should we think about uh, working through these partnerships in such a way where it's not just checking the compliance box on, yes, I've got data security and that's it. Um, what would you share with our audience on, how they should think through this piece and some of the challenges?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Don. So it's highly unlikely that most companies will have the resources to build a true production scale
Right.
AI capability from the ground up. So where does that leave us? That gets back to your point, Don, where you're more than likely going to be using a suite of tooling, and that's where there's several key risks and pitfalls that we thought would be a good idea to talk to everyone here about. So one thing that we see quite often is a little bit of a bait and switch. So you're interviewing partners, you're doing a POC, maybe you're building some on your side, you're doing an API call out to an AI service, for input into part of your process. Said AI vendor comes back and says, yeah, we can do this. Here's the results. Two things to keep in mind there. Did they generate those results in a time effective and performant way? In other words, when you start hooking up production volume to this, are you going to get that answer back in less than 5 seconds, for example? Secondly, what AI tooling and models on the back end did they use to generate that result? Because what they used to give you POC results, which look amazing, may have been using like Anthropic Claude Fable 5, for example. And they can afford to do that for a few transactions as a show you type of thing for a POC. But once they productionize it, the Fable 5 model serving 100,000 transactions a day is not going to be economical to you as a customer. And so you really need to ask the question about, what models did you use on the back end to produce these results? The other thing that you've got to keep in mind is, especially when you're dealing with the foundational model providers, there is sometimes a big benefit to using an intermediary SaaS provider or AI provider. And that's because you may have heard of, the phrase token washing in the Bitcoin world, but your data is being aggregated through an intermediary, masked and anonymized before it goes into the foundational model provider. That protects you as a customer. A lot of the old wisdom used to be, hey, I don't want to be in a multi-tenant environment. I want my own, data privacy reasons and all of that. But actually, when you're dealing with an LLM provider, that actually benefits you because there's anonymity in numbers. So if you're working directly with a model provider, the thing you got to keep in mind is they're in the data business.
Mm-hmm.
And they need data to train on, and specifically domain specific data. So we've been approached by different big names about, hey, we want to buy your data, whatever else. And the thing is that, first of all, we don't do that. But secondly, you have no control over your data when you use, Chat GPT or Anthropic, or especially not any of the other overseas models, because they're not bound by the same U.S. law structure.
Yeah,
So
real quick, just to add to Jay's comment,
yeah,
if you don't believe us, go ahead and put your token or password into Claude and see what Claude responds with. It freaks out and it says, "I can't believe you just shared this with me." And you think to yourself, "Well, why is it bad that I'm sharing it with you?" Jay just answered it. So it's very real, and you can test it yourself right now if you wanted
Yeah,
to. But don't. But don't.
but don't. But please don't.
one other point risk to keep in mind, Don,
Yeah.
I think that's important for everybody is, we talked about earlier how the landscape is changing so rapidly, and every other week or so, one of
Yep.
the frontier models is producing a new version, getting better and better. You as a business and a consumer of AI services need the flexibility to switch between models. And there's architectural ways to do that. Ours, for example, we have a layer in between us and the model providers that makes us model agnostic. And so, but to do that is very hard to do because different prompts, different sets of data are interpreted differently by different models. And so we use a couple of different technologies to allow us to do that. The other aspect of it is it gets really expensive to really statistically compare the results of this model with these prompts against this other model with these prompts and whatever else. So that requires resource investment on your part as well, and people who know how to do that. Lastly, there's often a lack of understanding about how the models differ. And so sometimes you see it in the model name and you don't realize it. So you may see, Chat GPT, you may even know this better than me, Don, but like the OGPT 5 or something like
Sure.
that. A lot of times what you're seeing is how many billions of parameters are in that model. The more parameters, the more complete the result's going to be. But also means the longer it's going to take. But you're going to pay more for those models. Whereas, the 3.x models are 3 billion parameters, generally speaking. You have OpenGPT 3, you have Haiku 3, Sonnet 3, whatever.
Right.
You're not going to get as full and robust result set, but it's going to be a lot cheaper and it's going to be super fast. And so there's all sorts of levers and trade-offs here that unless you're super experienced with all this stuff and have tried and hit your head against the wall a couple of times, you don't want to find out when you're trying to meet a deadline.
Right. It's complex, right? And I think that's the piece where we see, we start seeing some of these horror stories, right? Companies have deployed AI. They replace headcount. We're now seeing some of that where it's like, hey, that, they had to reverse course, or they're looking for like different force multipliers for their people. And just, I know, you've had some thoughts on this specifically in the past. So how seriously should operators take those stories of like the failed deployments and the unwind, where AI works and where it doesn't?
Yeah, this boomerang effect is a real thing. The biggest version of this, or instance, most public instance of this, was this fintech called Klarna that replaced some 700 people in their customer service department with AI, and then they had this massive customer backlash because the service level and the service standards went down, and people were really unhappy, their customer base, and so they kind of boomeranged and came back, and in the end, their deployment of AI ended up costing them more than if they had just kept doing what they were doing. And so that's definitely the example of what not to do. I think, going back to what I shared earlier, I think it's super important to find the important tasks where AI can bring value, and don't try to have AI do everything. So,
Right.
focus on, high volume routine work, things like auditing documents, for example. A lot of that can be done with AI, and that kind of routine work can be easily replaced. And then focus your human resources on things that require emotional context, or institutional knowledge, or the edge cases, the exceptions that come up when the AI can't make a match, for example, using the audit example. But you have to be smart about how you deploy it, and don't try to go too far too fast.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
yeah.
I do know, I knew we'd go long on all of these topics, and you guys have done great on trying to hold it together here and leave time for Q&A. So I do want to, for our closing block, and maybe this is just uh, maybe instead of 30 or 45 seconds, we give the 15 seconds as we kind of go around the horn. But for someone in the audience, who's feeling that pressure to do AI from their board, their customer, their competitors, themselves, right? But they're just not sure they're ready. What's one question that they should be asking themselves before they make a move? Uh, you know, and I'll start us off. I think the important one is, do you understand the pricing model well enough to project costs, right? Especially as your volume ramps. That's one that I would give the audience to be asking. Jay, what about you?
Tangent to that, I'd say, are you really locked in on how you're going to measure the value that you're going to get out of it?
Precisely. Justin?
Yeah, I would say, the problem you're solving, like, make sure you're super clear on the problem. This kind of dovetails with what Jay was saying. Have a problem to solve with financial metrics around, being able to measure the solution and what the outcome was from that.
Beautiful. Emily?
Yeah, I would echo what Justin said, and it's knowing what the problem is you're trying to solve, but also being ready to make changes to solve it. We get many times we'll get people like, all right, ready for you guys to automate and do this, but no, we don't want to change any of our processes. It's like, you can't do both, right? You can't hold on to the processes that are not giving the automation and then purchase a product or AI to automate. So you have to be comfortable with getting uncomfortable.
Yep. And then Brian?
For me, it's similar to what Justin and Emily said. Absolutely 100%. If you're not solving the right problem, then why build the solution? But I'd like to really tie into effectiveness and being able to feel good at the end, which is take a good, solid look at your current processes. Make sure you have a snapshot and make sure you understand how to measure what you currently are doing. Because if what you're currently doing is not measurable, you have to first figure that out so that when the solution is in place, you can do a compare and contrast and see the vast difference. And that way you also drive better change and continually make it better, because that's what AI and software innovation is all about.
Awesome. Awesome. So one, I'd love to thank our panelists. Frank, I know you're chomping at the bit with Q&A. And this is the thing that we could have talked about for probably 2 more hours. Thanks for everyone's patience. And Frank, I'll hand it back over to you for Q&A to round us out.
Awesome. Thank you, Don, and thank you to our panel. Amazing topic. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in, and I know we're short on time, so I'm going to pass this as we get them. So we have one question that says, for tasks that don't have measurable time save or subjective to the user it impacts, how do you measure impact and ROI? How do you track the user perception to get those metrics?
I can take that one.
Please.
Because I think everybody's a little stymied on that one, and I get it. And I would say, don't start until you know how to track it, and that's the first problem there. Secondly, you can use all the tools that are in place now for how your customers are going to like it, all sorts of UX type of measurements and things like that. Justin can probably speak very well to that sort of thing, but that would be and Brian, that would be the main metric there. How are people using it and interacting with it?
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. We have another question. Any use cases that have positive ROI for private carriers? And I know that there is a little bit of a nuance to private carriers versus for hire.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you still have invoices, you still have driver pay flowing. There's a lot of use cases internally in your company where accuracy matters and auditing, that type of thing. So yes, they're ample. And let's take that contact and we can drum up some specific white papers that we can share out with this team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Don, one thing I'd just add there, just very briefly, there's a ton of use cases around the operational side there as well that, we've looked at as well, around things like which docs do I know are going to have a greater than 15-minute dwell time, and how do I build that into my routing and scheduling, just as an example.
Yeah, or you can ask this question, what is the cost of a rebill? So if your customer takes 30 days to pay you and you just messed up an invoice and now you have to rebill, what does that actually mean to your bottom line? That's a huge one that's usually not measured.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. I have one question here that says, what is an example of how TransFlow has implemented AI in its solution today?
I can take that one. So we, number one, have taken the strategy of embedding AI in everything in all of our products, number one. We took the time and made the investment to build a core AI engine. We had a lot of great partnership from a couple of firms, our own internal knowledge. AWS came to the table like rock stars as well. So, we built a general purpose engine that really helps us deliver automation to your back office. And that engine is not just a simple toss a document to Claude or toss a document to ChatGPT and say, tell me what this means. That engine is purpose built with models specific to different document types and layouts and formats and what action that it implies on the back office side of things. So we have a pretty complicated AI engine It serves up some amazing insights that powers our workflow AI suite of applications. And we're now starting to look at embedding that on the mobile side of our product as well to benefit operators, planners, dispatchers, and drivers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. We are at time. I think there was 2 other questions. So what we'll do is we will, of course, follow up after we conclude today. And I do want to thank the panel for their time and dedication on this topic. I know AI is definitely a hot button issue, and there's a lot of not just nuance, but there's a lot of cloud cover into how to strategically apply AI to their operations. If we did not get to your question today, feel free to email us at contact@transflow.com. And yes, a recording and slides will be sent out to our registration list afterward. If you have not signed up already, we also provide newsletters on a quarterly basis that covers this and many more topics. From our panel, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.